Hello class. Today we're going to start looking at CSS, cascading style sheets. Up until today we've been looking at HTML, which has been the tool that has been giving us the ability to add text and images to a web page. And without CSS, without any kind of styling, we would have black text on a white background or a colored background, and it would be pretty boring and not that exciting to look at, and it would lose people's interests. That's the way the web started way back in the day, but now we have CSS at our disposal. So CSS is the language that gives web pages their visual appearance. While HTML defines the structure and meaning of content, CSS defines how that content should look on the screen. It is a textual language similar to HTML, and it controls colors and fonts and spacing and layout and even some interactive effects, making websites more engaging and more user-friendly. We separate the structure from the design. CSS allows us as developers to maintain consistency across multiple web pages while keeping the code organized and flexible. So as of now, we've been using just one single web page, one .html document. Imagine having multiple HTML documents and you want to change styling across all those pages. Well, without CSS, you would have to go into each page and make the changes manually. With a CSS document, we can make a single change in a single file and have it take effect over every page in the website that references that CSS style sheet. So much like HTML, there are a lot of properties and selectors and rules and values. And I think the best way to go through this is to look at some examples and see how they take effect on different pieces of HTML and what the resulting web page looks like. So that's going to be the tact of this video. I've got a few PowerPoint presentations and those will be posted into Brightspace. I'll also share some web link references so you can look at all the different properties that are available to us. There are way too many for us to cover in this one video or even this one class. So starting out in our textbook in chapter 4, in week 4, we start with section 1, Introduction to CSS. And CSS, as you can see here from the difference in the two pages, two frames on the page, the left is your static HTML, and your right now adds in some additional selectors and properties in the form of CSS rules on the right to change the color and the font and the weight of the screen. And if we scroll down a little bit, we could see the effect of those CSS rules on the HTML output. So we have the ability now to add CSS rules either into the style tag in HTML. Then this tells the browser that the style will be a CSS rule and it should be processed as such. Or we'll be able to tell the HTML document to reference an external file containing all our CSS rules. Or we can do a combination of both. I've updated our lab to show that we can have both the style and we can have the reference to a style.css style sheet. And this is the syntax for the link to that style sheet. And if we click on and expand the files, we'll see here is our CSS style sheet template. It is blank, there's nothing in it, but we'll be adding some stuff into it in a little bit, and we'll see how that affects the web page output. So going back to our textbook, again, we're going to look at some CSS rules. So the CSS rule is the foundation of CSS. It tells the browser which parts of the page to style and how they should be styled. Each rule is made up of a selector and a declaration block. So over here we have some common selectors, an H1 selector, a P selector, a strong selector, and another P selector. So these selectors, if you'll note, they match the HTML tags for P, strong, and H1. And that's not by coincidence. This is telling the browser to modify all elements in HTML that match the CSS rule with the associated property. Now these are just the very, very basic rules that are telling us to affect all H1 tags or all P tags or all strong tags, and it'll apply this formatting. Either a background color, and this would be the property, and this would be the value. So the property would be a background color, and the value would be light gray. Now, colors are interesting, and we'll see colors in this slide in a few minutes. Colors have the ability to be defined in multiple ways. Some simply by writing out these little words, or others by specifying RGB values or HSL values or hexadecimal values to actually dig down into the exact color you want. So like I was saying, each rule is comprised of a selector, a declaration block, which is enclosed in the curly brackets, and each curly bracket will then contain multiple instructions written as property and value pairs. So this is the property, this is the value. This is what's ultimately going to define what the resulting output is going to look like. So let's dig right into it. I have some sample HTML, and this is based on the work that we did earlier in the week to show different elements of HTML and what their effect would be. So I'm just going to copy and paste it into our browser here, and we'll see what the output of that HTML looks like. Let's close this over. We don't need this open any further. We have our style sheet open. We have our index open. For this video, I'll be putting all my CSS into the style sheet here, the style.css as an external document. We easily could put it into the style tag here, and maybe we'll try a couple like that as well. I'm going to run the instance and get our web server up and running, and then I'm going to pop it open into another tab as soon as it does. It'll be easier to see, and that's this little icon right here. And there is our new tab opening up, and we're losing the top of the page a little bit, but we'll scroll that down and get the top in there. Okay, there we go. There's the top of the page. And as you can tell, it is a very boring web page. Black text on a white font, on a white background, with a very common Times Roman font. It's just not that exciting to look at. Yes, it does provide information, and yes, that could be useful, but doesn't really draw your attention to it. So going back to our discussion, let's bring up the selectors, and we'll start with some element selectors. So the first one we're going to look at is, well, the element selector, and this is a rule of what it would look like, and the rule itself says convert the color to blue of everything in a paragraph tag. So I will take this rule, I will simply copy it out of PowerPoint, and I will pop it into our lab window, into the CSS document, and I will simply paste it in. And you see the online editor automatically formats it and gives us a nice, easy renditioning of it so we can easily see it. It even puts in this little blue color picker here, and that's a reference. It's a property of the IDE we're using. Not all will do this, most will, some may do it differently, but it gives you the ability to change the color, and here's your color picker where you could pick any color you want. But for now, we're just going to go with blue. Now, since we did make that change, if we look over at our document, we could see everything that was in the paragraph tag are all blue. Very simple, one simple little rule changed all our text to blue. Now you might be saying, what happened with week 1? Why did that text not get converted? Well, if we look at the code that's in week 1 and we scroll down, there are no paragraph tags. We have a div tag, but we don't have a paragraph tag. So only items that matched the P tag got selected. So that was a simple case, the element selector. Next up, we have a class selector. Now, with a class selector, we have the ability to apply a single CSS rule to any element that has a class attribute as part of the HTML element. So you see we have this class element, and we can put a class element on just about any tag. So we can use this rule, and this rule says dot highlight. It's identifying a class. The name of the class is highlight, and the dot is the reference to, well, that it's a class selector. The CSS property is background, and we're going to set the background of whatever is in that class, in that HTML element, to yellow. So again, we'll copy the rule, and we'll go over to our lab, and we'll put it into the style sheet, and we can give it a new line and paste it in place, and it'll apply it, and it even converted the yellow to a yellow icon so we could see it, and it gives us some more information about the color. Great. Now, let's take a look at our rendered output. You see we have nothing in yellow. Well, that's because we did not add the class tag to any of the elements. So we're going to come back to our index.html, and let us add some class to the HTML. So we'll do class equals highlight. Let's put it on the div tag because the div tag was looking pretty boring for a while. Let's add some text to it and see how it looks. There it is. It highlighted it all to yellow. And just to demonstrate the ability to use the class selector on multiple classes and multiple tags, let's put the class selector on this heading 2 here, indicating that we're in week 4. So going back to our rendered image, there it is. So you could see with the class selector, we were able to affect the output on multiple HTML elements instead of just the one with the previous selector. It's a little more powerful. Next, we'll have a look at the ID selector. Now, the ID selector works similar to a class selector, except that instead of looking for a class, it's going to be looking at a field ID. So it's going to target an element with a unique ID, and in the example we have here is the first name of an input field. So if we look at our input field in our HTML, we'll see, let's scroll down to it. Here's our input fields. We have an ID first and an ID last to give these elements an ID. And if we want to target the first, we'll use this rule. And the rule says, and you could tell it's an ID selector because it starts with a hashtag or a pound sign. It specifies the name of the ID first. And in this case, it's changing the border of the element to a 10 pixel solid background. So let's copy this rule, and we'll paste it over into our CSS sheet. And we'll scroll over and take a look at our output, and here it is. So we were able to affect the look and feel of the outline of the first name input box on our form. So that's the use of the ID selector. It allows us to give items IDs and change them that way. So you might be thinking, what's the difference between an ID selector and a class selector and an element selector? Well, an ID selector targets a element with a specific ID, and IDs are unique. So an ID selector is targeting a very specific element in HTML. A class selector, as we saw, can be applied to multiple HTML elements at our discretion of which ones we want to have that styling applied to. And the element selector, the P tag, for example, will apply to all elements with that tag. So ID is more strict than class, and class is more strict than element. So just remember that order. So next up, we have the universal selector. And the universal selector, as its name suggests, will apply styling to every element on the web page. So now we have something that can affect everything. So before I implement this rule, and you'll see it just an asterisk as the selector, I want us to note something on our web page. You could see the spacing between all the words here and all the paragraphs. So it's pretty spread out. When I go into our lab and I put in the global selector or the universal selector, you can see it right here on the bottom. I don't even have to navigate to the other tab. You could see that everything has been compressed because we changed the size of the margin. So if I change the margin to a bigger value, you see things have shifted around a bit. I'll make it a little bigger to make it obvious. Even that's not that obvious. Let's try 40. So you see how things are jumping around and spreading out now. So this allows us to change the complete look and feel of everything on the web page. So it's a pretty powerful selector. So you must be careful when we use it. I'm going to temporarily take it out of our lab. Actually, you know what? I'll leave it at 0. This way it matches the documentation. And if it is a little compressed, but that's okay for this example. We'll just leave it in and go with it. So after the universal selector, we have a multiple selector. This allows us to apply styling to multiple elements. So for this example, the H1 and the H2, we could change the color to green. And the idea here is that we specify the different elements, the HTML elements, separated by commas. So let's put that in our styles. Let's see how that looks. And we go over to our rendered web page, and we can see that now our heading 1 and heading 2 have changed to this green color. Interestingly is that the highlighting that was in this heading 2 is still there. So the rules don't override each other. They kind of work with each other, meaning that we had the highlight rule first and then the green text color rule second. Well, the green text rule didn't cancel the highlighting rule. It just put itself on top of it. So we have the green on top of the yellow. Not ideal for color scheming, but you get the point of it. Okay, so moving on. Next will be a descendant selector. And the descendant selector, as its name implies, will apply to all elements inside another element. So in this particular example, in this rule, first we're looking for a section tag. And then inside the section tag, anything with a P tag, we're going to change the font size to 24. So it's very specific that it has to have a section and the P inside the section. So again, let's copy that. And we'll put it into our style sheet. And we'll jump over to our rendered page. And you could see here we have a section with P tags, a section with P tags, a section with P tags. All these, the blue text is now increased to a 24-point font. So you can now control elements inside elements. So next up we have a child selector. The child selector allows us to affect elements that are embedded in another element. So in this particular example, we're looking for all H2 elements that are inside a section element, and we want to change the text to be underlined. So this will only affect H2s that are inside a section. So let me demonstrate that. I will copy this code and I will put it into our browser, our style sheet. And now we have all sections with descendants of H2 should be underlined. So let's take a look at our output, and sure enough, all our sections and H2s are underlined. Let's see this one here, this one on top, this Suffolk County Community College is an H2 also. I'll show you that in the code. And we'll see that it is not in a section tag. It is in a header tag. So that is why it did not get underlined. So the child selector only applies to elements inside other elements. And we can even get a little more granular with adjacent sibling selectors, meaning that, very similarly, we're only going to affect P tags that are immediately following an H2 tag. So you can see with this example here, this is the week 2 section. We have an H2 and we have 2 paragraphs. So once we implement this rule, only the first paragraph tag will be highlighted red, the second will not. So let's copy this HTML, because I don't think this exists in the template. So we're going to take this and we'll put it into the section. And we can just create a second week 2 section so we don't override it. Might look a little weird with 2 week 2s, but that's okay. Let's clean up the text now and line it up and get rid of all those extra end of line characters that I forgot about when we copy from PowerPoint. And we'll fix that up and clean it up. And let's get rid of all these. And you could see I included a comment in here. So this is an HTML comment. I think we talked about that earlier. The format is you have your opening tag of an exclamation point and 2 dashes, and your closing tag of 2 dashes and a greater than sign. So now we have 2 week 2 sections, and we'll call this one alternate. And now we'll go back and we'll copy the rule. And we'll put that into our style sheet. And this is saying that all paragraphs immediately following an H2 will now be red. And there they are. So here they are. This is the first paragraph. This is the second paragraph. This is the first paragraph. This is the second paragraph. Only the first paragraph was selected. Now you'll also notice that this text was blue and now it's red. So when there's a conflict where we had 2 rules overriding each other, we had one converting the text to blue and another converting the text to red, decisions have to be made as to which one takes precedence. So in general, the universal selector has the highest priority. Element selectors that affect specific tags have the next highest priority, followed by pseudo elements. And then we have class selectors, attribute selectors, and pseudo classes. All these will be listed in our textbook. And finally, ID selectors. So just keep that in mind when you want to have priorities of different rules. You may want to have different tags or selectors or elements to define which is the order you want. For now, we're just going to stick with basic rules, and it should not be an issue. However, should you run into a conflict that you can't resolve and it's not styling the way you expect, please send me your code. I'll take a look, and I'll provide some feedback. Okay, jumping back to our slides, we only have a few more to go. The general sibling selector. So this applies to all siblings after an element, like all P tags after an H2. So instead of the plus sign, we have the little tilde character, which in math terms means similar. So we'll steal our code, the H2 squiggly P, and we'll put that in, and it's going to make all the paragraphs in an H2 italicized. And sure enough, even the ones that didn't get the red from the prior tag are now italicized as well. So all our H2 or paragraphs in an H2 are now italicized. Next up is our attribute selector. So it's a little different. So now we're looking for tags, HTML tags, that have a specific attribute as part of their element. So in our example, in our lab, we have towards the bottom, we have a selection list. And in our selection list, we have two countries, USA and Canada. And the name of this selection is called country. So we want to be able to style anything with the name equal country to be a different color. And that's what this rule here is doing. So any select element with an attribute of name equals country will be styled orange. So we can now specify elements with specific attributes when we want to style them. So let's take this code and we'll paste it into our style sheet. And when we look at our rendered code, USA was not orange. That was interesting. I was expecting it to be orange. So clearly there's something wrong with that rule. Let's go back and take a look and see if we could figure it out. Okay, well, first thing I spot right away is I could see this little red underline here underneath the curly brace telling me that something is wrong. And just a quick examination, it looks like I left out the right square bracket. So let's put that in and fix it. So unfortunately with HTML and CSS, if you make a typo and you forget something, it doesn't flag it as an error when you run it. The only way you'll be able to determine if it's an error is A, if your text doesn't look right and your styling doesn't look right, or B, you have an IDE such as this Coding Rooms IDE we're using in our textbook to highlight the error. So just keep that in mind. If something doesn't look right, you may want to check your syntax. So going back over to our rendered web page, we should see it orange now, and we do, and we can make our selection of country, either USA or Canada. We'll stick with USA for now. And we'll also go back to our slide and fix the typo in there as well. Great. 2 slides to go. The pseudo class selector. So, and there are some other options for this, but basically what this is saying for any A tag, if we're hovering over it with the mouse, we're going to color it green. And we'll look at the different options of what we can use for these pseudo selectors. So the idea here is for this link where it says visit SUNY Suffolk, when we hover over it, it's going to turn the text green. So you've all seen when you hover over a hyperlink in a web page, it changes from that default blue link to a different color. Well, that's what this is going to control. We're going to control the color of the link after we style it. So we'll go to our CSS and we'll change the hover to green. And if we jump over to our web page and find the Visit Suffolk, which unfortunately is at the bottom of the web page, so let me adjust that and bring that up so you could see it. There it is in the very bottom left. If I hover over that, you could see it turns the green color. Okay, so let's put that back to where it was so I can screen capture. And we'll go back to our slides and look at our final slide. It's a pseudo element selector again, and it allows us to highlight the first line of a style, or the first line. And again, there are multiple different options that we could put here instead of first line. So the idea is we're going to update the first line of a P tag to be bolded. So we'll put that into our document. And we'll come back and look at our rendered page. And our first line of a P tag has been changed to bold. So another way of changing the way the font looks. So we have all these different types of selectors to make choices. So this was not meant to be a fully all-inclusive discussion of all CSS selectors. Again, that would take way too long to do, but we're going to look at the basic ones, which we just did. I wanted to point out some web page reference. This is called csstricks.com, and I selected the CSS selector guide, and you could see it's a rather long web page, but it goes over in detail all the different selectors and different complex scenarios and general selectors and different combinations that you can use. So this is a good reference document. I would read through it if you have time and you're interested in this, or if you get stuck and you want a little more detail that maybe Zybooks doesn't provide to us. But that would be the discussion on selectors. I did want to touch a little bit on those pseudo selectors, and we'll take a look in our book, and we will look at the advanced selectors, and it will give us a little further down some of the different options for the pseudo selectors, and here they are. So you could see you could combine the element with these different options, an after or a before or a first line, which is the one we looked at to match the first line of text in a block element. You could use the first letter, and you can do an entire selection. So you really can get quite granular with these different options. So I just want to make you aware of it. So when you do have a need to be very targeted in your approach, you can see the different things you could try to reference that will help you. So again, great web page here, has a lot of great information. Have a look at it at your leisure. For now, we're going to go back to Zybooks, and then we're going to take a look at some of the properties. Now, I'm not going to go into all the properties. I'm going to give you a quick summary of some of them, but I wanted to at least focus on the color property, because that to me is one of the more interesting ones, and there's multiple ways of setting values. If I look at our properties slide, again, here is your CSS, here's your rule, and we just looked at all the rules, so we know this is every H1 inside of a header will get this color red. And the color red is a predefined value for CSS. And there is a whole list of those. So another great resource is W3 Schools, and I'm going to show you a web page they have here. And it lists all the CSS colors, the name and the color, and a sample of what that color looks like. So you could see all the different colors by name, and you can reference them by name. I don't know who came up with the names, but here they are. But for example, if we wanted this turquoise, we could put in turquoise into our CSS as an option, and maybe we'll try that in our lab. We'll change the country to turquoise, TURQU, and it even gives us the option so I don't have to spell it. And if we look at our rendered web page, now it's turquoise. Interestingly enough, if you see below it is this pound sign 40E0D0. That is the hexadecimal value of the red, green, and blue colors that make up turquoise. So you could specify it by name. You could specify it by this hexadecimal value. If I click on the color picker, it shows up a different selector where you can have the original color, what it looks like with different text. You could see your RGB values, which are the red, green, and blue. So 40, E0, D0 converts to this 40 becomes 64, this E0 becomes 224, and this D0 becomes 208. So you have that. And then you could see different lightnesses and darknesses of the color. So you really have a neat way of specifying different colors, and this is a great color picker so you can get all the different options that you want. HSL is another version of this color scheme. I don't see it used very often. I see more of the RGB. It's hue saturation matrix. Again, it's nice to know, but I think RGB does it just fine. You can get the same colors with either of them. RGB values are based on a 0 to 255 in each category, whereas HSL, you could see on the right, there's percentages. They go from 0 to 100% with a single value indicating the base color. So it's a little different. RGB is by far the standard, so I would just stick with that one for now. So we saw the color properties. We saw that there's multiple ways of selecting colors. You can also add an alpha value, which indicates a version of transparency. So you can make your colors whatever color you want, and you can make it somewhat transparent if you wanted to. So that gives you another value option there. And you could see by putting in a value between 0 and 1, determines the amount of opacity. 0 means fully transparent. 1 means fully opaque, means you can't see through it at all. And 0.5 means halfway. So you could adjust not only the colors, but how much you could see through those colors. And you could see there are just so many properties. You have the background color, which we saw we could set the background color of the text to. And I did include some examples here, so if you wanted to try them, I'm not going to go in and try each one of them. I just want to make you aware of them. You could set a background image, so like a banner image behind the text. So like in Brightspace on the header, you have the picture and then the words in front of it. That would be the header tag and the background image. Then you have a float where you can adjust the text in left and right. You have clear, which resets the floating. You have a display, which controls the inline behavior of the text. You can change to fonts, which is very important. Now, font family is very interesting. Is that you can specify a very specific font that you want, or you can specify a font family. Now, browsers and computers by default have certain fonts available to them. And let's take a look at that in our textbook. I believe it is in here. So we'll scroll down. There's a lot of great examples in here too, so definitely take a look at these. I must have passed it. So let's see if I could find that. Oh, here they are. Oh, that's float. That's float, that's display, variables. We'll get to variables in a second. Oh, it's in the next section. My apologies, we're in the wrong section. So you could see here, you could specify all different font properties. You can give it the family, the size, the weight, the style, a variant if you want to change it from a normal text to a lowercase letter, but it appears capitals. And here's what I was talking about with the families. These are the different families of fonts that are generic that we support. So you could see the serifs, the sans serifs, and the serifs are these little things that kind of hang on the edges of the letters, like the T in Times Roman's got those two little things on the top and bottom, and the sans serif doesn't have those little embellishments. And then we have the cursive fonts and some other fonts in here. So these are your font families. The idea is if you're going to specify fonts that you specifically want, specify those first, and then specify a default family in case they don't exist on the destination computer. Because you don't want the browser to randomly pick something. You really want to control it so it prints at least something that you want it to see. So we have the ability to control fonts, the font size, the font weight, the font style, whether you want it to be italics or oblique or normal. You have the font variant, which you can change it to all caps or small caps or regular. You can have your text alignment, left, right, center. You can have your text decoration, where you could have the underlining or the strike throughs or the overlines. So you have those options. You could transform it to purely uppercase. So if you wanted all your text to be uppercase, you can do that as well. And then you could change the size of the indents. So that's just a brief summary of all the things you could do with properties and elements. There is a great resource, I'll show you that now, of all the different CSS properties, so you can get a handle on why we're not going to cover them all in this book. Okay, going back to my resource, W3 Schools this time, I have a list of all the CSS properties that you could set values for. And as you could see, as I scroll down, there are many, many, many different styles that we can apply. I'm just going to stop here at color and click on it because it will give you now some examples. It'll give you a definition, some usages, some different values that you can use, and a whole bunch of examples that you could try it with. So it's a great resource. W3 Schools, it has a list of all the CSS properties that are available to us. So you can definitely reference these. If there's something specific you want to try, go ahead and see how that goes. Okay, so that's it. We talked quite a bit about CSS elements and properties and how they affect different pieces of code. I will post all these resources in the resource section. I will post the sample codes that we've developed in our lab together here as well in the week 4 section. So that's it for now. Again, reach out if you have any questions or concerns, any problems. I'm here for you. Thank you.